and I said this in a speech in Parliament some time back, India is not described as a nation, it's described as a union of states. The exact line is, India, that is Bharat, is a union of states. And the implication of that is that there is a ongoing negotiation between this union of states, right? So in the Congress party, we view India as a negotiation between its people. Mm-hmm. The RSS views India as a geographical entity. Mm-hmm. So that's the big difference. So for us, India comes alive when India speaks, and India dies when India goes silent. Okay? And what I see is going on is a systematic attack on the institutions that allow India to speak. Right? Parliament, the election system, the democratic system, the basic structure of democracy is being captured by one organization. And as the conversation is being stamped out, the deep state is entering those spaces and redefining the way that conversation is held. And you can see the impact of this in different parts of the country. You can see this in the type of policies that are being implemented as well. So, for example, if you look at the way GST was implemented, instead of having a detailed negotiation with the states.
So that's a national taxation program.
Right, the GST is the tax. Instead of having a long conversation, detailed conversation with the states, it's just decided that on so-and-so date at midnight, we're going to do GST. Right? So it is, what I see as the big problem is the stamping out of the voice of a billion plus people. And that, I am absolutely convinced, is going to have repercussions.
Okay, so I'm considered to be a tough supervisor, so I'm not going to let you go off so easily on that one, because some people would say that actually Modi is very popular. This has a huge amount of social mandate in India, and that the victory of Modi, in several regional elections, okay, some setbacks here or there, that actually this is popularly mandated, that perhaps Indians have changed, not so much the idea of India.
Democratic contest depends on certain structures. It depends on a election system that is free. Mm-hmm. It depends on a judiciary that is completely independent. Mm-hmm. It depends on a press that is fair. And very importantly, it depends on the type of money that different political formations have. Mm-hmm. Right? So, if we are fighting an electoral contest, and we are fighting the institutional structure of India, right? We have taken things to the Election Commission, and we get no response, right? There are you can see the press in India. I mean, the press, if you look at the television in India, there's one gentleman who's on it all the time, nobody else, right? So, I mean,
we know, yes.
That's, you see one gentleman there, and he's the only gentleman who occupies that space. Now, in a sort of 21st century environment, where your means of communication is media, where your means of communication is social media, and they have total dominance over those, of course it will affect the mandate.
So you think that in a way, the story of Hindu nationalism, how would you kind of want to assess the ascendancy of the idea of Hindu nationalism in relation to, say, Nehruvian India, or what Congress stood for, which was a multi-religious social compact? So don't you see that contest is much more about, this is not unique to India, you're seeing such exclusive forms of neo-nationalisms across the world. So how would you kind of, how would you want to sort of make a plea now for, as I said, for the older idea of India? Is it sort of worn out? Does it need?
I'm not going to make a plea for it.
No.
That idea exists in India, and that idea is going to fight back. Now the question is, how is it going to fight back?
That's right.
Right? You can't impose a one ideology on a place that is as complicated as India, and you can see it. So as they push this sort of centralizing ideology, you can see the result in states like Tamil Nadu, you can see the results in states like Punjab, you can see the results in the Northeast, right? So you are putting pressure on the union, on the conversation, and it's going to react. If you think that it's not going to react, well, you're in for a surprise.
So then, put this on the kind of democratic map or the political map of India, do you think that this poses a particular challenge to the Indian National Congress? Because one of the things that struck me, because I teach a course on Indian democracy here, it struck me is that India is unique from other mass democracies, say like America or Britain, which have always had a two-party system, right? You have the Tories and you have, the Labour Party. And India, you've always had one national party and lots of regional parties. And that was the story for the Congress. And now do you think it's a change of hands or something else is going on?
That's, I think, the wrong characterization,
Okay.
if I might say so. No.
Go ahead.
Because if you look at, again, view India as a union of states. Now tell me which state has more than two parties. Tamil Nadu has two parties, UP has broadly two parties. So Madhya Pradesh has two parties, Rajasthan has two parties.
No, I meant it at the national level.
No. In our system, if you're going to compare a United Kingdom, right? Think of India much more like Europe than you think.
That's right.
Than like England, right? India is much closer to Europe than it is to England. How many languages are spoken in England?
Don't shame the English now.
Right?
Don't shame the English. It's just,
One.
we grew up with three, they grew
Okay,
up with
maybe
half,
So no, but we have to get this right, because if we're going to understand it properly, we have to get it right. So it's much more accurate to think of India like Europe and think of a Europe that is politically and economically united. That's what India achieved
Agreed.
70 years ago.
Agreed.
Right? Which, by the way, Europe hasn't achieved yet.
No, it's a federation and broken again.
And it's under pressure. So what was achieved 70 years ago was quite a powerful, unique thing.
Absolutely.
Right? But it requires conversation between these states. Now, where does the question of the Congress Party and the BJP come in? The National Party, right, is the party that stitches up the conversation.
That's right.
Right? So, actually, I don't see it as a real challenge for the Congress Party. I see it as a huge opportunity for the Congress Party if the Congress Party reacts to it properly. Right? And all political formations go through transitions. Right? If you look at the record of the Congress Party, everybody gets excited that we are now not in power for 7 years, we're in power for 70 years. Right? And we've played a significant role in developing the country and in bringing India to where it is. Of course, we need to reinvent ourselves.
That's right.
We need to rethink.
We
We need to rethink what our role is. We need to rethink how we interact with the people.
So what would be the first thing you would think requires a rethink?
The first thing that requires rethink is opening the doors of the Congress Party and bringing in millions and millions of youngsters into the party.
So a new,
Right? That's the first
the
thing.
millennium. Okay. All right.
Now, you're clapping, but this is not so easy.
Yes.
This is not, I see, when I was your age, I was like, yeah, that thing's easy to do.
Yeah.
But after a while, it's not so easy to do. It can be done, it takes time, but it's not so easy to do. The second thing is that there's a ideological fight going on
That's
in
right.
India, right? There are two visions. One vision that says essentially the BJP vision, RSS vision, says the social order needs to be protected. Right? India should progress, but people shouldn't move up and down the social order. And what we are saying is that one man, one vote, everyone should have equal opportunity, everyone should have equal access. This is a contest.
No, I get that, and that takes me straight to the question of the economy, because, of course, the UPA government in particular, and just years preceding to that, was the high moment of India, both in the global stage, but also the liberalization of the Indian economy, the rise of big tech in India, and, of course, the most ambitious and largest welfare programs in the world, such as the Manrega, the minimum employment guarantee scheme. Now, the question really is that sort of model, in the sense you had high growth, high private investment, high liberalization, high interaction with the global economy, but also high public spending in India. That, with under UPA, and that seems to me, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, that model doesn't seem to be a Modi's model, because he has very targeted welfare schemes. It's a whole. So in a way, the economic kind of basis, economic policies also that the UPA laid down, your government laid down, seem to be changing. So where do you see the kind of economic scenario at a time, actually, it coincides also with deglobalization. So UPA was part of the global moment of, accelerated connectivity in the world. And now for the last 10 years, 12 years after financial crisis, there's a kind of slow deglobalization, which is accelerated, it seems, after COVID. And men like Modi seem to have gained under such conditions. So how would you do that?
On the sort of Hindutva side and on the exclusion side, Modi is different than the Congress.
Of course.
Right? But on the economic side, Modi is taking what was sort of our middle of the road balanced ideas to an extreme. Right?
Say more.
We were trying to balance the rural and the urban, for example. We were trying to balance big business and farmers and laborers. He's not really interested in that balance. His idea is, I get the sense he thinks of the Korea model, where you have large, big sort of chaebol, right, that monopolize, and then I think he thinks he can give a sort of payoff to large numbers of people and let these people concentrate power and wealth. Right? In my view, that won't work in India.
Why?
You get a huge backlash. Right? You will get a backlash that you will not know what's hit you. The other point is that view these things as a continuum. Right? Don't view them as UPA did something and now Modi is doing something. They feed into each other. So what do I mean by that? We did Narega, right? Most people think Narega is a handout to poor people.
No, I don't, but yeah.
If you ask most Indian people, what is this Narega? They'll say, well, why are you making people lazy? Why are you giving them, money in their pocket, etc., etc. Actually, Narega was a labor market intervention, right? And Narega created a massive reaction in Indian farmers. It was a very powerful move, but it created a particular reaction, right? And then that reaction feeds in to what comes after. What I'm saying is, don't think that good policies carried out now won't later create a backlash that gets you something that doesn't look anything like what you were doing. Right? For example, Aadhaar. We had a totally different vision for Aadhaar.
So let me just say, Aadhaar is universal identification in India, which was brought in. Your government had thought about it, had piloted it, but it became standard procedure now in India.
So we put in Aadhaar, which is sort of a unique identity. Right? And in our wildest dreams, we didn't imagine what Aadhaar would be used for.
Yes.
Right? So that sense has to be there. You have to have a sense that something that you do right now looks very good can suddenly take another turn under another administration.
So you mean it's more about surveillance rather than about...
Today?
Yeah, so...
Oh,
spell
today,
it,
today.
yeah.
Aadhaar
How
has
would you
become,
describe...
it's become a weapon.
Okay.
It's become a political weapon.
So that actually takes me to the question on, on actually big tech. This is Cambridge. This is the place where a lot of the tech happens for Britain. And, of course, there was Cambridge Analytica, as you know, from here on misinformation, and in which actually several Indian elections were involved, as you know, quite apart from Brexit and what happened on the international stage. You mentioned monopolies also as well. So they're two related questions, or you might want to take them separately. But it's sort of, even Biden is facing the question of monopolies, particularly around big tech. And it's going to be a big story about his presidency, whether that's going to be regulated or not. So there's the problem of kind of information around elections, campaigning, around, say, Facebook and WhatsApp and other big tech. And then there's a related question of monopolies, which in India is not a tech monopoly. In America, it's a tech monopolies that they need to be broken. How do you sort of see the new architecture of this kind of digital economy?
Why do you say it's not a tech monopoly in India?
No, I mean, there's other ones too, like Adani. I mean, it's a multiple. It's not simply tech monopolies. It's a kind of, as you know, that from airports to, you were saying the other day, what I'm trying to say is that it seems to me that the world of deglobalization is leading to the rise of monopolies, both in America and India, for instance. And in India, it's kind of couple of places, but in America, it's much more about tech, as you know, and these are also related to politics, because how are we now going to conduct elections?
Well, I'll tell you my personal experience. I don't believe that the large social media companies are neutral.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't believe that, right? At least my experience in Indian politics, and I can give you examples. I'll give you one personal example where on my Twitter account, I was getting 40,000 new users a day, right? And then I went to a girl was raped in Delhi, a Dalit girl, and I went there and I did a protest. And magically, my Twitter users went to zero. They went from 40,000 a day to zero. Right? And we wrote to Twitter and said, what's going on? Like, please explain this to us. No answer. They said, we don't have the data. We don't understand this. We are checking. 3 months later, we decided to get in touch with the Wall Street Journal. And we told the Wall Street Journal this. And a day before the Wall Street Journal article was coming out, it went back to 40,000.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That's my experience. Right? Now, it's the same with WhatsApp. I don't believe that these are neutral platforms.
Yeah.
Right?
So what is to be done about them?
For example, the head of Facebook has never met an Indian opposition leader.
Yes.
Right? He comes, he meets the Prime Minister, goes home. I think the CEO of Facebook was a BJP person.
In Delhi, yes.
In Delhi.
Yeah. That's,
Right, so why are we imagining that this thing is a neutral entity? It's not.
No, I'm not. I'm not saying that. So,
I'm not saying that to you. But so the tech monopoly. If you look at the way Indian elections are being fought, they're essentially being fought on these platforms.
Yeah, that's
They're being
right.
fought on WhatsApp. They're being fought not so much on Twitter, but on WhatsApp, on Facebook, on
TikTok.
Google. But TikTok's gone.
Gone. Yes, I know. They were very important the last time.
No, but this is very important. But this is very important, right?
Yeah.
TikTok's gone.
Yes.
Why is TikTok gone? Right? So, the first level of monopoly is the media monopoly. I think what someone said, 140, 160 media entities owned by one person.
Yes.
Right? So you have a media monopoly, and then you have multiple monopolies, business monopolies,
That's right.
that provide finance to the BJP. Right? So that's what we're facing.
So how would you maneuver this? This is so kind of hegemonic and so all-encompassing in this description.
The
then-
only way to face it is by going directly to the people, which is what the Congress Party did before independence. That's the only way to face this.
So back to Gandhi.
Back to Gandhi.
Social movement, protest movement, massive.
Yeah, and
massive movement.
there's a lot of appetite for that. There's a lot of atmosphere for that, and the Congress Party needs to redesign itself to absorb that energy and use that energy to create a new vision for the country.
Well, that's the. Okay, so I'm going to move you on a little bit and move you to the international scene, because a lot of people were sort of, we talked a little bit about America, a little bit about tech companies, but we haven't really said anything about China. And China really is this big story for India. And I think that hasn't really been appreciated in the international press at all. I mean, I've been on several panels, and people are kind of always asking me fundamental questions as to why, for instance, India takes positions that it does currently. But we'll talk about Ukraine in a second. But there isn't enough appreciation of the Indo-Chinese issue at the moment. So tell me what you think about China as a rising global power, and in relation to particularly its neighborhood and India.
So I think there are two competing visions now on the planet, right? One is the Western, India is a part of it, which is a maritime vision, and the other is a terrestrial vision, the Belt and Road, and a terrestrial planet, where most of trade moves from China through the old Silk Road to Europe, and China dominates that trade. Right? That's the clash, and that's what China is building, and what China is offering to the countries around it is the idea of prosperity. So China is saying, allow us to build your infrastructure, allow us to put in the communications backbone, allow us to put in 5G, allow us to put in all that stuff. We'll give you the money, you build your infrastructure, and then we will have prosperity together. That's what they're offering.
And?
Right? And it's a very powerful thing to offer, but it's not in our interest. It's not in India's interest that China expands out like this.
Why? Because we're on the way to Europe, or just because we're physically there, or is it a rivalry, a civilizational rivalry?
I don't see it as a civilization rivalry, but it'll have severe consequences for India. It'll have serious consequences for India.
In terms of Chinese expansionism. So why do you think the international world is not fully aware? The story is always told in terms of America and China, and which is why people
because that's really those are the two poles, right? So America defends and defends one vision, and China is placing another vision on the table. Now, where I have a problem is when the West speaks about China and when the United States speaks about China, they always talk about stopping China's rise. So they have a sense that you have to stop this thing. Well, that's fine. But my question is, what alternative are you giving? Right? If China's promising prosperity, you can't say to India that, look, we will have a defense pact and we will fight with China without the prosperity part of it. Right? And
so the Indian trade has to continue.
Well, so to me, the real question is, if there is an alternative vision, that vision needs to actually create prosperity. It needs to create wealth. Right?
But Sri Lanka and the Chinese story hasn't really worked out, or would you say it is?
Of course, the Sri Lanka has gone very wrong. The Chinese have put in a huge amount of money. Huge amount of that money is being stolen, and it didn't pan out. But the idea the Chinese are proposing is prosperity. China, they've given $100 billion to Pakistan.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And so they have a very clear vision about what they're trying to do. And it's a powerful idea. It's not that it doesn't have a basis. But from our perspective, I think we need to have an idea that provides prosperity. Of course, there is a defense angle to it, but there has to be an economic angle to it.
Right.
And currently, I don't see the economic angle to it.
So in
Our relationship with the United States,
yeah,
for example,
yeah,
is hugely about defense.
that's right. It's moving that way. Clearly.
More and more.
More and more.
I mean, when we talk to the Americans and the Americans talk to us, we talk about defense.
Yeah.
We don't talk about, okay, how do we jointly create prosperity and create a democratic model that can make people rich?
And does that worry you?
What do you mean? Yeah, it does.
Okay. So so on to Ukraine, and then I'll come to a final question before I open it, which is that the whole story of Ukraine, when India kind of, as it were, refused to take a position, spooked certainly the international media and strategic circles here. Because precisely for the reasons you have just mentioned, that in the last 10 to 15 years, India has been seen to be going closer to the US, and then for not actually signing on to the UN story, the UN amendment, not amendment, the UN move. It was seen, well, what is India up to? And the word that was used in India was that, well, India doesn't really want this bipolarity. It's going to have a multipolar world. How do you read this? Is this a continuation of Nehru's idea of non-alignment, which has been resurrected in certain kind of perverse ways again, or is it?
No, I don't think the government believes in Nehru's idea of non-alignment, but I think the government understood its constraints, and it understood clearly what the constraints were, and I don't think they had much of a choice, myself, right? But I think it's better to have a foreign policy that is strategically thought out, instead of a foreign policy where you take one decision with one event and then suddenly another decision with another event, right? And I also don't think it's about being, with America or against America.
That's right.
I think it's more nuanced than that. I think India is a big country, and India has multiple relationships, and India has to deal with the complexity of its own reality.
Okay. So, I'm going to ask a slightly semi-personal question, and then I'm going to open the floor, which is because, obviously, 75 years, we can take small bite sizes into the last opening decades and now more recent decades. But actually, there's a middle period, and you and I both belong to that middle period of that generation, which is that we are not Midnight's children. We are born in the 70s. We don't have any of the optimism that our parents' generation had. And we, of course, also grew up with a lot of collective violence around us. I in Punjab, but I was not alone. There were people in the Northeast, Kashmir. But also, soon after that, you had the Hindu-Muslim story flaring up with the Babri Masjid mobilization and caste violence as well. So violence, has been a kind of big feature of people of our generation. And in your case, it's all too personal. So, we've just had a recent anniversary of your father's assassination this weekend. So my question really is about actually a kind of Gandhian question about violence and how to live with it. And in your case, it's also personal. And so could you sort of say a little bit on your own personal resilience on it, but also how you envision the compact between violence and non-violence in Indian society?
I think, the word that comes to mind is forgiveness, right? It's not precisely the most accurate. It's how to put it? You realize. I'm thinking. You realize, right? No, because you've
I didn't mean to stump you, but it's
No, you
a
haven't
very
stumped me.
obvious. It's a very
You
obvious
haven't-
question.
You haven't stumped me.
But no one's asked you. I'm surprised.
No, they've asked.
Have they? I've not. Then why don't you have the?
Because
why don't I know
I'm
the
trying
answer?
to go deeper in the answer.
Okay, let's do this.
So, I think in life, you will always, especially if you're in places where large energies are moving, right? You will always get hurt. It's not, if you do what I do, you will get hurt. It's not a possibility, it's a certainty. Right? Because it's like swimming in an ocean with big waves, right? You are going to go under. It's not that you're not, right? So then, when you go under, you learn how to react properly. So when you
So loss is productive. Loss
the
versus-
single biggest learning experience of my life was my father's death. There is no bigger experience than that. Right? Now, I can look at it and say, the person who, or the force that killed my father, caused me tremendous pain. Sure, it's correct. As a son, I lost my father, and many of you would have, and that's very painful. But then I can't get away from the fact that that same event also made me learn things that I would have never ever learned otherwise. Right? So, as long as you're ready to learn, it doesn't matter how nasty people are or how evil people are, as long as you're ready to learn. If I turn around and, Mr. Modi attacks me and I say, oh my God, he's so vicious, he's attacking me. That's one way of looking at it. And the other way of looking at it is say, great, I just learned something from him. Give me some more.
Okay. Very Gandhian. But now, yeah, with you.
No, but you come to this, right? When you're facing an attack, you come to this. There is no other realization possible.
No,
It's like that. There's a poem. I don't remember the name. It's written by, I think it's a Palestinian person
All right.
who's been put in jail.
Okay.
I'll send it to you.
Okay.
And he's talking to the jailer. And the jailer, he says to the jailer, look, from the small window of my cell, I can see your big cell.
Right.
Right? So everyone's in jail.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And you've got to be able to see that properly.
Right.
And if you see that properly, then you can figure out ways to deal with it or ways to get out.
Well, thank you. Yeah, first.